So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Sword Art? So let's start the series. For many people, winter was a lovely season, but now they detested it so much. It was cold, damp, merciless, and did I mention cold? Soldiers huddled near fires to stay warm. The fact that high-altitude bombing had all but destroyed the city they were in didn't help either. One of the soldiers trembled. Man, they weren't kidding when they said that this game would be really realistic. This was a virtual battlefield, not a real one. They all discussed the game among themselves. Damn right it is, this game isn't for noobs like those GGO players, you need to be hardcore for this game, another person concurred. One of the soldiers said, did you hear about the rumors? The so-called White Death is in the area, and he's been picking off other parties for quite a while now. Well, everyone listened quickly. Another soldier remarked, I hear he doesn't even make a single sound when he's out hunting, as numerous others nodded. Before the battle had even started, they were already losing faith. There's a reason he's called White Death, and he's rumored to be the best aimed sniper in the whole game, a soldier said as they all grimaced at the news. The officer of the small group of soldiers looked around and shook his head. He got up and immediately caught their attention. Listen up you fools, we are out here to prove that this so-called White Death isn't all undefeatable. Other parties have tried to hunt him down, all have failed, but not us. We shall be the first to prove that no matter how skilled you are, you can't solo this game. This game was built on the basis of teamwork, not individual skills. No one man can change the tide of battle. It is the combined efforts of a well-oiled machine that battles are won. Now get up, let's hunt us a sniper. The officer shouted as the rest of the soldiers stood up and held their weapons in the air, inspired by their officer's resolve to hunt down a legend. Then it happened, bang, the sound of a rifle firing, and before they knew it the officer lay dead, a bullet straight through his head. His body disappeared in many small pixels. They all stood there in fear. Then they heard more shots being fired, and two more dead comrades. They quickly sprinted to find cover. Some found it behind some barrels. Others behind some rubble or trams. Then it was all quiet. One of the troops muttered to his partner soldier, you think he's gone? The man raised his head slightly before a bullet passed through it, causing his body to recoil and vanish into a sea of pixels. Another soldier said, there's your answer, as he fastened a mirror to his stick and used it to catch a glimpse of the enemy sniper. He could see the scope's brightness flashing in the distance among some ruins. One of the soldiers behind some barrels laid out the plan. Okay, he's about 500 meters from our locations. You three, go through the city ruins from the right flank. We will provide covering fire and keep him pinned. The three soldiers on the right nodded as they began to head into the ruins. Fortunately, there would be enough cover for them to avoid detection. The soldier behind the barrel nodded and turned to face the other two soldiers with him. Ready? Covering fire. He yelled as he and his two fellow squad mates squatted up from their cover, firing everything they had at the sniper's location. Machine gun bullet shells left the chamber of their guns, assault rifles firing 3 burst rounds. They fired every single round they had on him, before the two men with the assault rifles had to reload. But the machine gunner kept on firing, and it wasn't long before his fellow comrades had reloaded and resumed fire. Allowing him to reload quickly, they quickly stopped as the radio came on. The leader of the now 6-man group stopped as he reached for the big radio pack behind him. He quickly took hold of the receiver. One of the men he had dispatched said, Sir, no one's here, and he scowled. He asked them, what do you mean no one's there? They hurled everything they owned onto the spot. Like I said, no one's here, but we found a scope. It seems like he must have dropped a scope of his when he retreated, the opposing soldier replied, flashing them the scope. They all looked up to see their fellow soldiers standing where the hostile sniper had been. Did he escape under all that fire? The leader didn't laugh. He understood something was amiss. Ha, some sniper he is, dropped his damn scope, one of the soldiers said, laughing, followed by the machine gunner. He yelled into his receiver, get out of there. That place is rigged. But it was too late. The position in front of them exploded in a cloud of smoke and flames. The sniper must have set up timed explosives, cunning bastard. What the? Before the machine gunner could finish, a bullet pierced his head, killing him. They turned around, but it was too late, and another round killed the remaining members of his squad. He turned slowly to face the enemy sniper, his hands shaking. Who was this guy? This game was very realistic, even though it stings a little when you get shot. He dropped a group of 9 experienced players with ease. He started to scream as he started firing in the sniper's general direction, hoping that he would hit him, but it never happened. Instead, he got a bullet right into his leg, which caused him to fall and clutch his leg, as blood oozed through the spaces of his fingers. He looked up as he saw a figure walking towards him, his rifle slung back. The soldier thought, no way. He's a sniper. He has seen the lad in the lobby before, but it didn't appear that he was the sniper. Because he was so preoccupied, he didn't realize the sniper was just in front of him, until he brought out his sidearm. Go in peace, the sniper whispered as he fired a single bullet into the soldier's head, executing him. His body, like the rest, disappeared many little pixels. The sniper looked up into the dark sky with his deep blue eyes that showed indifference. Another day, another kill. He holstered his sidearm and proceeded to log out. Tonight, he would feast like a king, he thought to himself. After all, he had school tomorrow, so he thought, 113 kills today, not bad. They make it so easy by actively trying to hunt me down. As he logged out for the day, he took off the visors around his head and put them aside, got out of bed, yawned a little, then went to his table, took out a textbook and a notebook, and started working on his assignments. The following day, he found school to be a dull experience. It was too easy and offered no challenges for him. This was made possible by his intelligence, as he was actually at the top of his class. He didn't care, though. He just went through the motions. At the moment, he was on his way home when he heard someone yelling. He turned to face the alley to his right and saw 4 figures, all of whom were female. Upon closer inspection, he could see that the 4th one was being bullied by the other 3. His eyes narrowed, and his fists tightened. He turned to the alley and began to walk towards the would-be gang of girls. In an attempt to intimidate him, one of the girls asked, "Oi, who the hell are you?" She nearly screamed when she turned to face him. He was 6'1", had wild blonde hair, and 3 whisker-like scars on each cheek. His school uniform wasn't in the best of shape, and overall, he gave off a Yakuza vibe. "And now look here, WAD don't want any trouble," the apparent leader of the 3 girls said nervously as she backed. If this guy was Yakuza, then they better run like hell. All he did was move to the side, and they ran past him, looking to make sure they were gone. He turned towards the traumatized girl. It looked like she was about to hurl, taking in her features. She appeared to be 5'4", a modest height for a teenager these days. She had thin dark hair tied in small ribbons by the sides of her face, with the back cut short. She wore a pair of half-rimmed glasses with oval-shaped lenses. Her skin was pale, and her eyes were black. Currently she was using the wall as support to prevent herself from falling. He bit the inside of his cheek. Times like this he wished he could talk. He pulled out a notebook from his pack and a pen, and quickly began to write in it. Once finished, he pulled the girl to turn towards him. She turned to him, only to see him holding up the notebook with the writing in it. She read the notebook and asked, "Are you okay?" She blinked once and then twice to get her bearings. When she looked up, she saw that the owner had such neat handwriting. She was a little intimidated, but she forced herself to ignore her fears because he had helped her. Then he prodded her once more and pointed to his notebook, asking the same question, and her eyes widened. She forgot to respond. "Oh yes, I'll be fine, thank you," she said, bowing. Was it a boy or a man? She noticed that he was wearing her school uniform, and that his body type was that of a swimmer. He nodded before packing his notebook and heading out, but she didn't even know his name until she stared at his retreating form. "Wait, what's your name?" she asked as the boy paused and appeared to consider his next move before approaching her with a pen in his hand. He brought his hand forward as she blinked at him, perplexed by his behavior, and he sighed as he made the motion of asking for her hand. She blushed, embarrassed that she hadn't figured that out, and blushed even more when she felt his hand take hold of hers. He then began writing something on the palm of her hand, and when he was done, he released her hand. The girl looked down at her hand and read the writing. The now named Naruto nodded when she asked, "Naruto?" His name was an odd one, and he was about to go when she remembered she hadn't even introduced herself. She said, "My name is Asada Shino," and Naruto nodded before turning to go but was stopped again. He looked down to find that the girl had grabbed his sleeve, and he turned back to her as she blushed a little and twirled her hair. She said, Would you like to join me in a cafe? My treat." She could tell he was about to say no, but his stomach rumbled, which made him blush and make her laugh. He was obviously hungry, so she took that as a yes, and began dragging him to a nearby cafe. In the meantime, Naruto was trying to figure out this girl. One minute she was about to have a heart attack, and the next she was friendly, so he assumed she was trying to forget about it. It was a classic way for people to deal with their problems, and he could tell that the girl was a loner, but it didn't take long for her to drag him into a cafe and start ordering food. He just decided to eat cake, because what could go wrong with cake? Naruto nodded before writing something in his notebook. "I want to thank you again for helping me," she said, bowing gently. She read, "No problem," and questioned why he wrote in a notebook instead of just speaking. As he began to perspire a little, she asked him, "Excuse me, not to be too rude, but why do you not talk?" Couldn't she get a hint? Before showing it to her, he hastily jotted down his response in his notepad. She read, "I'm mute," before realizing. She seemed to be apologizing a lot as he only jabbed his pen into her forehead. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have realized it sooner," she said again. She read, "Calm down, I get that question a lot," and she felt sorry for him because he was unable to communicate. "Though it's not all that bad, I know Japanese sign language, but few Japanese know it, so I prefer to simply write to answer questions and communicate, other than in the virtual world, I can speak in it." She read of his notebook, she raised a brow, he played virtual games. He giggled a little, although you could hear it and just see the action. He wrote something down in his notebook before handing it to her. You play video games. Like GGO. She said, knowing a few others who played the game as well. When she read, no, I mostly play a game known as Frontlines, her eyes widened. With astonishment and amazement, she exclaimed, you play Frontlines. As in that super realistic game based on the Second World War. I hear you need to know stuff like Unite designations, how to read military maps and more for that game. It's filled with hardcore players. She felt a tap on her forehead and glanced at the notebook. It's not that hard, just gotta know how things work. Besides, my role is a sniper, so I play solo mostly, she said. He arched an eyebrow as she said, you're a sniper too. Did she also play the game? She decided to explain things out after noticing the misunderstanding. Bordeaux grinned at her prideful statement, I play GGO, and I play sniper as well, you should transfer your avatar. Maybe we can team up. I'm one of the best snipers in the game. He scribbled something and presented it to her. I'm the best sniper in Frontlines, players call me White Death, and I have killed hundreds of players, his notepad wrote. She had a little smile. When she challenged him, then we should see who's the better sniper. Bordeaux laughed once again and jotted down a comment. She read, I'll transfer my avatar. Frontlines is a hardcore game, no assists, no bullet lines, no shields, it's just plain and simple realistic warfare, so I'll join Frontlines, and she could honestly say that she had never felt this excited before. The idea of taking on one of Frontline's top snipers was difficult, and she even recalled some old news about the game. The JSDF used it to train its soldiers because it was so realistic. He must be confident to say that he's the best of the best. The following day, Bordeaux sighed as he completed the last task. With a small smile, he went to his bed and picked up the visor that would transport him to the virtual world. After putting them on, he lay down on his bed. Instead of saying the usual link start, he just pressed a button on the right side of the visors, and before he knew it, he was in front of the character creation screen. Let's see, transfer avatars, he pushed as he pulled by his Frontlines avatar. The avatar wore a German Second World War sniper uniform, and had a captured Mosin Nagant 9130s. To be honest, he liked the sniper and felt that he paid homage to Simo Heihe, who was a legendary fighter during the Russo-Finnish War, and used the same weapon. He felt that since his name was White Death, he might as well live up to it. He transferred his avatar and he spawned in the game quickly. He turned to one of the windows and looked at his avatar, which looked like his Frontline avatar, which was based after him. He hummed as he swiped down the menu and examined his skills. He glanced at his screen and said, looks like my skills do carry over, noticing that his aim, stealth, and endurance were off the charts. Being a sniper required a lot of labor, so he figured it was because of his Frontline avatar, which led him to carry his weapon about, move between sniper nests, and sneak up on hostile players. He heard, Oi, Naruto, is it you? And turned around, nearly blushing, to find a girl with blue hair tied in a similar style to Asada. He assumed it was Asada because of her distinct attitude. She nodded, and he asked, did you Asada? She answered, but my in-game name is Signing, while Naruto gave a nod. Bordeaux said, well, my in-game name is Naruto, as her eyes opened, and she nodded. Bordeaux laughed when she exclaimed, wow. You can talk now. This female was strange. Well, the system reads the mind, not the mouth, Naruto clarified. However, a girl with long dark hair interrupted them. She appeared disoriented. The girl asked, excuse me, but can you help me? Sinan laughed and offered to assist, but Naruto shook his head. When she nodded, he asked, you're an amateur. Sinan gave him a raised eyebrow. As Naruto grinned and showed her his statistics, she chided him, aren't you an amateur as well? Her mouth fell open when she saw them. As Naruto began to laugh, pleased by her behavior, she exclaimed, what the hell? How can you have such high stats? He was not prepared to give up his Mosin Nagant, and would rather have it than those slick new weapons. Turns out, when you transfer an avatar from Frontlines, your stats get boosted. It's pretty dang cool. Now I can buy me a good old Mosin. They do sell Mosins here. Do they? He asked. Bordeaux laughed when Sinan said, you want to use such an old weapon. It's over 70 years old. Don't diss the Nagant, Naruto retorted. That weapon was once used by a legend who killed hundreds of Soviets, so yes, I would use the weapons. Sinan simply waved her hand. She looked to the other girl, who nodded, and said, you need money first. Hey, do you need money as well? Since they didn't have the money to purchase such weapons, she let her and Bordeaux to play a game with the cowboy who shot at people when they attempted to tag him. Bordeaux smirked and turned to face Sinan. Man, people must really suck if they can't get past him, even with bullet lines, she stated as she took the initiative to start the game. He smirked again as he watched Sinan's reaction. Watch and learn, young sniper. Your first lesson, a sniper must be quick on his feet, Naruto said confidently as he charged forward, the bullet lines appearing before him. He didn't stop as he simply dodged the bullets and started to run even faster. In fact, he became too fast for the cowboy to keep up and quickly tagged the cowboy, quickly winning the huge amount of money. She asked him, how are you so fast? His response was so astounding that Naruto laughed. This game is why I am so fast, he said, adding that players could reach high speeds in this game. In front lines, a player's speed was determined by how much they trained. He surmised that his frontline skills improved his speed here. He turned to face the other girl, who was equally impressed. He said, "Here, you can have half of my funds. I don't think a Mosin will cost all that much," as Sinan began to guide them to a gun store. She assisted the other girl, and Naruto appeared to know what to do. He looked at the market's firearms, his eyebrows twitching in frustration. His voice trailed off, "All these damed snipers and not a single Mosin," but a smile appeared on his face. He had found one. He was also able to purchase a Colt 1911, a vintage. He remarked, "Now then," to find Sinan, and as he glanced around, he saw her yelling while riding a tricycle. Since the bike was about to pass below him, he leaped over the railings and was soon seated behind Sinan. They soon reached a place where Sinan and the girl, known as Kirito, would sign up for Bob. "Will you relax? This isn't as bad as it looks like," he said, smiling as Sinan scurried. This was crazy, but she soon began laughing too. Naruto asked, "The hell is Bob?" There weren't many events in Frontlines. At most, there were great battle events. The day would be filled with significant wartime battles, Stalingrad being his favorite, and plenty of hiding spots for snipers. As she inputted her details, Sinan responded, "It's an event where they determine the best player in GGO. You also get paid the amount you win." Naruto stepped up to a terminal and began inputting his information, saying, "Really? I'm going sign up too." As she approached him, Sinan asked, "What's your block?" Naruto glanced at the block to which she was allocated. "The F block," he said, and Sinan gave a small smile. She confidently said, "Good, then I get to fight you, if you make it to the finals," and Naruto smiled back, making her blush a little. Looking at it now, he looked handsome. Sinan then led them to a place where they would enter the first match and change into their gear. Other players greeted them as they entered the basement, all loaded up and flaunting their weapons, and Naruto sneered at them. Naruto remarked, "What a bunch of fools, showing off their weapons and gear, it's like they want to get killed," and Sinan nodded. These idiots were all going to die. Sinan said, "Well, I'll change with her in that room, you take this one, see you soon," as she pulled the new girl to the changing room. Naruto nodded and went into his own changing room. He quickly equipped his equipment because everything he needed was brought over from Frontlines, so that was a plus. He took off the scope from his rifle, which you wouldn't need, but was useful for trapping enemies. He put it away as he left the changing room and saw Sinan, who was looking very angry. He approached her as she spoke to the girl. "You don't look happy. What happened?" He questioned her as she gazed at the girl with a glare. Naruto turned to the girl, or was it a boy? "Oh, I don't know, why don't you ask this guy what's wrong," she said. Naruto yawned and turned to his right to see someone approaching them. "Man, you're one sick man," he said, sitting next to Sinan. They discussed the impending match and other topics. Sinan asked the man, "Oh, hey Kyoji, you joining as well?" It appeared as though she knew him, perhaps as a friend. He gave a sheepish smile, but Naruto's eyes furrowed. There was something off about this man. He replied or inquired, "No, I'm just here to cheer you on, what took you so long?" "I was trying to find you," and she gave Kirito a fierce look. She responded, "I was just helping out a new player, that's all," while Kirito patted his head. Kyoji flushed slightly when he saw how uncomfortable Kirito was. "Yes, thank you for helping me Sinan," he replied, behaving like a girl while grinning. Kyoji believed he got lucky, before Sinan chose to pour down on his parade. "Just so you know, he's a guy," she said as Naruto began to chuckle. The men's response was so precious. Before they could say anything more, the event started as everyone discharged their weapons, and Naruto got to his feet. As he was flashed away, Naruto remarked, "Well, I hope you all try your hardest and stay alive, Sinan. If you don't make it past these bunch, it's impossible to tell who's the best sniper." Missing Kyoji's expression, Sinan sneered. As she was also flashed away, she said, "You're right, I'll win for sure," and Kirito followed shortly after. With Naruto was in his element, which is snow. "This is going to be easy," he said to himself as he ran off and started to find a suitable location. He soon found one, a few trees looking over an open field. He looked to the opposite side, another good location for a sniping point, but a bit more obvious. He hummed before he ran over the second side. Once reaching the sit, he carefully placed his rifle scope facing the field, so it would reflect the sun's light off it, and to anyone or anything downrange. Then he made his way to the trees. As he climbed the tree, he nodded to himself before scooping up some snow and putting it in his mouth. He was wearing his winter overcoat to keep him hidden as he looked out over the open field. He then picked up his rifle and began to scan the area. His plan was straightforward. He would use his scope to make the enemy believe he was somewhere else, while he waited for him to reveal himself. He smiled as he scanned the area and saw that his opponent was walking straight into his trap. He didn't shoot, though, as he watched the enemy move through the snow. Naruto squinted his eyes and calmed himself. "What a fool, walking down rang. If I was there then he would already be dead," he thought, not daring to speak for fear of the snow falling out. "The target is about 300 meters away, so there isn't any wind or bullet drop to worry about," he thought. This was too simple in comparison to Frontlines. He said to himself, better luck next time, as he squeezed the trigger. The bullet swiftly moved through the air toward its target and passed through the idiot's head with ease, entering from the right and leaving from the left. His body broke into pixels as he vanished, and he nodded before being taken out. Once outside, he noticed the Corrido guy, who appeared to be quite shaken up. Naruto approached him and joked, "What? Your first time firing a guy?" The Corrido was obviously not paying attention. He shook his shoulder and scowled. He asked, "You there, man?" Corrido looked up and snapped out of it. Naruto arched an eyebrow. The Corrido didn't answer before being whisked away in a blue light to begin another round. Seinen said, "Have to say, that was an easy match," as she approached him. Naruto nodded, but he wasn't sure what had Corrido so excited. He then looked at the screen to watch Corrido's match, charging with a luminous light. They have lightsabers in this game. What the hell? Naruto asked, watching Corrido charge through his opponents round after round. He wasn't too bad, and his opponents never had a chance to fire a single bullet. They quickly advanced to the 5HT preliminary round, and this time he was facing Corrido. He hummed as he was taken to the battlefield, which was a ruined city. He looked around the city, and it appeared that he had been moved to a rather tall building. Realizing that his overcoat would be a hindrance, he unequipped it so that his urban camouflage would better hide him. It's clear that Corrido isn't an amateur. He won't fall for the same trick that my past opponents have, he thought to himself as he took his position and proceeded to examine the streets below. He soon found Corrido, walking down the streets. What the hell is he thinking? Naruto asked himself as he loaded his chamber, took aim, steadied his breathing, stood motionless like a statue, and fired once the firing circle was at its smallest. This was going to end before he knew it, but he was shocked when Corrido blocked his bullet with his lightsaber. His jaws dropped a little before he recovered from his shock as he fired the second round, but it was blocked again. He fired the third, fourth, and fifth rounds, all of which were blocked. He was crushed as he got to his feet after he saw Corrido enter the building he was on. He quickly reloaded before turning toward the only entrance, placed a controlled explosive before he began to run and jumped to a nearby building, looked toward the door, making sure to set off the explosives if Corrido made it, and quickly located a food spot directly across the building he was on. He took a deep breath, his sniper in front of him with his left hand holding the explosive's trigger, and his right index finger on the trigger. Soon, Corrido jumped out of the exit. He waited before Corrido was at least 2 feet away from the door before he triggered the explosive. The explosive sent shock waves, destroying windows, and throwing Corrido off guard. Taking his chance, he quickly fired off all 5 rounds, before he quickly slipped in another magazine and fired 5 more. If the really life White Death could hit a target 16 times in under a minute, they so could he. Finally, he loaded in another magazine and fired 5 more. 15 bullets, all aiming for vital arrears or killing blows. He was impressed as Corrido could block 6 of them, but the floor before him gave wave, knowing him off balance. Just enough time for the remaining bullets to hit him. He never even stood a chance. His body disappeared in pixels as Naruto stood up. He sighed, but smiled. When he arrived, he saw that everyone was staring at him. "It's going to take more than just charging straight at me," he said as he was flashed away. The guy asked, "Who is this guy?" "Don't know, but he's really good," said another. The last one made him smile as he approached Seinen, who was complaining, saying, "I think I have never seen a better sniper than him." He boasted, "Looks like people are calling me the best sniper here, Seinen," as she sneered. She shot back, "That's about to change, you and I are up next," as Naruto held out his right hand. He said, "May the best sniper win," as she shook his hand and the two were flashed away. Corrido, on the other hand, was taken aback because this was the first time he had lost a game, and Sao didn't count because the game master was using hacks. He narrowed his eyes and turned to the screen. His main objectives were either Seinen or Naruto, therefore he asked himself, could Naruto be Death Gun? With Seinen. Seinen positioned herself on the highway, peering over a sizable overpass. She was securely concealed within the bus and was eager to beat this man. Her hands were shaking as she shook off her head. As she glanced over the overpass, she asked herself, why do I want to beat this guy so bad? She shook her head in an attempt to relax, then glanced back and noticed a scope glaring at her. It's too far away, but I can't see him. Does he have camouflage? Doesn't matter, the scope will glare regardless, she thought as she took aim and fired a rifle, which kicked up dirt all around her. The shell hit the scope, but she didn't get any kill. What? She asked herself as her eyes widened. She hurried to her feet in time to see a bullet strike her location. As she hurried out of the bus, her position was compromised. She thought, oh crap, that was a trap, but she quickly stopped when a bullet went by in front of her eyes. A second bullet then struck her in the knee, severing her leg below the knee. She fell, but she quickly crawled to cover. Where was he? How is it possible that she was unable to locate a bullet line? There was enough warning for her to avoid those rounds. She turned to her left and heard him say, I'm surprised you dodged those rounds, as he approached her with a neutral expression. She felt a little uneasy and tried to stand at him, but he blasted her rifle out of her hand by his sidearm. Her eyes widened. Was this it? So easily defeated. She clenched her teeth. To him, this was all a game. When he didn't respond and instead began to approach her, she became enraged and asked, "Damn it, finish me off, or do you think I am not worth it?" She whimpered and shed a few tears. "It's all just a game to you, isn't it? You think it's not worth the bullet or anything," and Naruto just gave her a look as he lowered himself to her level. "You're wrong, this isn't a game to be signing, it's a test for me. Every kill I make in this game is a kill I consider a real kill. I want to know what soldiers feel like after they kill their enemies. What does it feel like for them to easily drop a target yards away, with the push of a trigger?" he said while observing her white eyes. What was he referring to? Did he also kill someone? He sighed and closed his eyes. "Signing, I know I am the best sniper, I always knew, I've trained to be the best of the best, even in reality. That is why makes me and the rest of the snipers in the vertical world different. They play for fun, and the few like you play on in this game. I might play as a sniper here, but I am also training to be one as well," he clarified as she understood what he was stating. She asked, "Why you want to be a sniper?" If so, he was well above her level. He nodded. He asked her as she looked at him, not sure whether to tell him or not, but she did. "People won't take me seriously because I am mute. Who in the right mind would allow a mute to join the military? However, I will make it. I'll become too great of an asset for them to turn away. Even if I can't speak, I can still take orders. That is what drives me to become the best of the best." "What drives you, signing? What makes you want to be the best in this game?" he asked. When I was young, I was with my mother, in a bank. It was a normal day, but then a man walked in and pulled out a gun. He demanded that the clerk hand over the money, but he quickly shot the clerk seeing the man reaching for an alarm. He then turned the gun on my mother, however. She continued to look down and recalls that awful day. Naruto said, "You intervened and grabbed the weapon instead," and nodded slowly. As she began to cry, Naruto sighed and gave her a hug, letting her sob on his shoulder. "I did, but the man tried to reclaim his weapon, but in the act accidentally shot himself. I then fired at him and killed him," she said. He attempted to reassure her, but she shook her head, saying, "It's okay, you saved your mother and acted out of self-defense. You have nothing to fear." She hugged him and screamed, "No. It's not okay. I killed that man and it was so easy. I can still see him, his bleeding forehead, I can still see him, damn it. That one incident had scarred her since she was a young girl. You must let that one act define who you are, Sada. You kill to defend. I understand that by using weapons you want to forget about that memory, but that won't help. Holding a weapon will only make you remember what you have done," he said while she was staring at him. She screamed at him, "Then what do? I just want to forget about it." He grabbed her by the shoulders and gave her a direct look. For the first time she heard him shout. She looked at him tearfully before nodding slightly and wiping away her tears. "Then you must move on. Just because you forgot about that day doesn't make you heartless. You move on, make new and better memories that make you forget about it. You're stuck in a cycle of self-pity. Snap out of it, and think about the future, not about the past," he said. She blushed when she answered, "Okay, I'll try," and a genuine smile came from Naruto, making him appear even more attractive. She blinked and felt the barrel of a gun on the side of her head. She looked over and saw that he was holding a gun to her head. "Good, now go in peace," he said. With that wicked smirk still on his face, she muttered, "Aw crap." Just before he shot her after her body vanished in his grasp, he got to his feet and looked up at the sky. As he was flashed away, he thought, "You're stronger than you think, Asada." He had previously been in the same room, but this time, everyone was staring at him in wonder. "That's one hardcore player," a player said in the game. "Was it a Masan, huh?" As everyone started to murmur, someone else said, "Holy SHT, I hear only a few people have access to that class of weapons." Naruto arched an eyebrow, wondering what they meant by few people. As she approached him with a pout, signing remarked, "They mean that they are rare weapons. Masan, while doing little damage, can bypass shields. Not only that, but your avatar is on a whole new level. I couldn't even spot you on the radar." Naruto laughed. Naruto grinned and replied, "I would be a piss-poor sniper if I was easy to spot," which made her flush and turn away. She shook her head and gave him a determined expression. "Well, you had better get ready because I'll win the next time," Naruto grinned as she yelled, pointing directly at him. He responded, "Then you had better get good. There's a large gap between you and me," as she gave him a determined look. He grinned a little at that, realizing that she was stronger than she had realized. He slid down his menu and considered his next move, but he hit a few buttons. A buddy request. When Signin opened her menu and discovered that Naruto had made the request, she asked, blushing as she turned to face him. He informed her, "It's okay if you don't want to accept it," wearing a false smile. She knew it was a fake one because she understood how to put one on. For a little minute, she could see the loneliness and agony in his eyes before they were crushed. "Naruto?" was her thought. She just glanced at him before granting the request, and when it was granted, Naruto blinked before grinning broadly before logging out. Signin remained there until she made the decision to do the same. The following school day. When Asada realized she was daydreaming, her face darkened. "Man, school was so boring," she sighed. "Well, at least those bullies didn't bother me today." So here she was, in class, listening to the teacher drone away about some history lesson. She didn't care, her mind too busy with a certain blonde. What am I doing wrong, she thought. I've never felt this way before, about anything, and definitely not about anyone else. Normally, her life would consist of going to school, coming home, working, and playing GGO. She didn't even realize that the lunch bell had rung when everyone began to eat, whether it was homemade food or cafeteria fare. She decided to go up to the roof and eat, and when she got there, she was met by an unexpected visitor. Bordeaux, she rushed over to him and sat down after the blonde in front of her turned to face her and raised an eyebrow before swallowing his food and waving at her. Asada, how are you doing? It appeared as though he had already written it down when she read from his notebook. Oh, how are you? I'm doing great. She asked him as he hurriedly jotted down in his notebook. They ate in quiet, which she and he both enjoyed, and she occasionally looked at him, and couldn't help but remember that he looked like someone she had seen before, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and tan skin. I'm okay, but school's really boring, she read with a giggle. It seemed like someone didn't enjoy school. She also noticed how well he wrote by hand, assuming that this was because writing was his only way to communicate with most people. Oh? You resemble Narumi Namikaze a lot, Naruto. Are you somehow acquainted with her? She said, assuming they knew each other because Narumi was the only blonde person at the school besides Naruto. She saw Naruto freeze, then take up his notebook and begin writing, his hands quivering a little. She read the response and was a little taken aback. She is my twin. She had never seen the twins together, much less converse with each other. However, I've never seen you speak to her. She asked as Naruto began writing, and it took him some time to compose his answer. The response caused her to gasp once again. That's because she doesn't know that I am her twin, she said, but she went on reading. I was born a few minutes before her, making me the eldest, but when my parents found out I was born a mute, they gave me away. But why? Why would they do that when you're so lovely and kind? She asked, and Naruto gave her a pitiful look before writing his answer. No one wants a mute, I guess, he wrote as she clenched her fists. The way he wrote it sounded so sad, to be unloved because of things beyond your control. She sympathized with him on that level. Well, you're mistaken. It doesn't matter if you're silent. I consider you a friend. It took her some time to realize what she had just said, and she blushed and began to fiddle around nervously. How embarrassing, she said as Naruto looked at her in surprise. He was laughing, but it was a soundless laugh, and he quickly jotted down something before he prodded her to look at him. She looked up and saw him holding his notebook. The fact that she was his first friend astonished her a little. Thank you, Asada. No one has ever told me that. You are my first friend, you know, she read. He was incredibly sweet and nice. You're not going to inform her? Then as he glanced down sorrowfully and jotted down in his notebook, she asked. As far as she is concerned, she is an only child. That's why that was told while growing up. As far as she knows, I'm just your average no-name orphan, she read while staring at him. But you're not an orphan. Your parents are still alive, she said. A little offended, Naruto shook his head and began writing in his notebook immediately away. Yes, they may still be alive, but they are not my parents. Parents never desert their kids. I have accomplished everything through my own blood, sweat, and tears. I didn't have a father who would play games with me or a mother who told me she loved me. My name is also mine. They didn't even give me a name when I was born. What kind of parent does that? She sighed as she took a bite out of her sandwich after reading and gently nodding in understanding. They sat in silence once again, but it was broken again, by someone else. Still, I find it baffling that anyone would be willing to do anything like that, she said, and Naruto simply shrugged. He didn't care because it happened when he was so young. Excuse me. They turned around to find one Narumi Namikaze. Naruto glanced at her with a neutral face, while Asada gazed at her with doubt. She didn't know what to think of Narumi. She was a school idol, being one of the best students, directly behind Naruto that is. Yes, as Narumi looked at Naruto and flushed slightly, Asada asked. As she glanced at him, she hesitated and blushed again. And Naruto-san, I was wondering if... Asada arched an eyebrow. Was she ill or what? I was wondering whether you might join me for a date. Asada narrowed her eyes and said, who did this brat think she is? Her eyes widened at her latest thought before blushing. Naruto cleared his throat, took his notebook, and started writing in it before showing it to her. She confessed as she shouted with her eyes closed. As she read his response, Narumi scowled and said, sorry, Narumi-san, but I can't. Why? Does it have to do with her? Are you and she going out? Asada blushed at the idea of her going out with Naruto, but she didn't mind. Naruto nodded and sighed, much to Asada's surprise, and when she turned to face Narumi, her scowl grew. What is it about her that I lack? I am well-liked, attractive, smart, and rich. Why would you prefer a murderer to me? Finally, as Asada froze, Narumi said with a slight smirk. The events of that day, including the man's voice and the gunshot, flashed through her mind, and she started to hyperventilate, almost throwing up. But before she could do so, Naruto pulled her into an embrace, and his hand ran up and down her back, calming her down. He gave Narumi a stern look that made her wince, and after he had Asada calmed, he took out his notebook and wrote down his thoughts. He wrote, I think you should leave. If I find you bothering Asada, then I will take things into my own hand, as he rose to his feet, towering above her. It worked, since she jumped and fled. After making sure he was gone, he descended and faced Asada, who was staring at the ground. Why would you stand up for someone like me? She said, she's right, I'm a killer after all. As tears began to well up in her eyes, Naruto shook his head and wiped them away. He then took her hand and wrote down his thoughts. Today was a roller coaster of emotions for her and Naruto. You're not a killer, Asada. You're brave, headstrong, determined, and pretty, but you're not a killer, she said, blushing as she read the pretty bit. If you wanted to, would you date me, she asked, blushing profusely and turning his head away. This made Naruto blush because he was at a loss for words. Sure, he had been attracted to her since yesterday, but what if things were going too quickly? But, on the other hand, he was mute, and few people were willing to put up with mutes, so Asada demonstrated that she could. He approached her and kissed her on the cheek, then stepped back, blushing. Asada's reaction was like a deer caught in headlights. She touched the cheek he had kissed with her hand, a dark flush covering her cheeks. He took her hand and wrote in his palm. Yes, she read. She didn't know when, but she began crying again. She felt butterflies in her stomach, and her heart felt like it was going to burst from her chest. She liked him, really liked him. She didn't know how, why, or when, but she did. Were things going too quickly? Sure, but it could also be said that it was true love. She grinned joyfully at him, replacing the tears of pain and fear with tears of joy. She smiled and said, thank you, Naruto-kun, leaning in to kiss him on the lips. Naruto was momentarily startled, but he quickly recovered and closed his eye, and the two melted into the kiss. They remained in this position until they parted ways and gave each other hugs, with Asada nestling into his chest, and Naruto's head resting on top of hers. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she said again, a little tear in her eye. She had found someone who would sympathize with her, support her, and be there for her. Everyone had rejected her, including her own mother, but Naruto didn't shun her because he understood what had happened to her as a child. He genuinely cared because he understood. Behind the door, which led up to the school's roof, was Narumi. She smiled as she peered through the door. As she turned to leave, she whispered, good luck, Naruto Nai-sama. Oh, she knew all right and was pretty mad at her parents, but they would soon get what was coming to them. Naruto quickly took his notebook, wrote something down, and drew Asada away from him to show her. She read, we should get going, lunch is about to end, and nodded while wiping away her tears. The two soon left for their separate classes, and by the time school ended, they had met. She was blushing profusely, and Naruto was slightly flushed. He prodded her as she glanced at him while holding up his notebook. Do you want to go on a date? They were ready to depart when Kyoji raced up to them. She read and flushed, nodding but unable to articulate the words because it was such a strange idea to her. Hey, Asada. Are you bothered by this guy? Kyoji asked. He appeared prepared for battle, but his knees were trembling violently. Naruto, who was noticeably taller than him and had a fighter's build, turned to face him and arched an eyebrow. Who was this guy? Kyoji? No, he isn't bothering me, Asada said as she turned around. Naruto nodded, indicating that this was Kyoji. Kyoji, however, was observing something else. He saw that the two of them were standing very close to each other and holding hands. It didn't take him long to figure out what was going on. Wait, are you going out? Asada blushed and toyed with her hair as he hesitantly asked. She said, why yes. No. This wasn't supposed to be happening. He was supposed to go out with her. She was his. Who was this guy? He would have done something and he knew precisely what to do. He asked with a sheepish smile, oh, that's great, I was wondering if you're going to be on GGO later today. Asada hummed before turning to look at Naruto. No, not today, she replied. She had other plans for the day, including one that involved a certain blonde. Kyoji nearly snarled when he saw that expression on her face. He detested it because it wasn't him who gave her that blonde. Rather, it was so unexpected. Damn him. He watched as the couple left the school grounds and went on their date. He needed to speak to his brother. A few hours after that, with Naruto and Asada. If he was being completely honest, this was the best day of his life. He had never been in a relationship like this before, and was a little concerned that it was moving too quickly, but he was surprised to find that the two were very similar. Both of them were essentially alone, with Asada's mother abandoning her and Naruto's parents abandoning him, though she did have a grandfather who occasionally called to see how she was doing. It also turns out that Asada enjoys using ranged weapons. Although she was a little afraid of guns, which is why she played GGO, Naruto said she needed to hold a real one to overcome her fear. The weight of a real one is nothing compared to one in virtual reality. They went to a small restaurant and had a nice meal while conversing over it, before deciding to go to bed, but it was obvious Asada had other plans. They were now going to her apartment, but Naruto was flushed. What did this mean? Come on in, Asada said as she opened the door to her tiny flat, which was adequate for one person to live in despite its modest size. He took out his notebook and began writing before urging her to turn to face him. She read, you live pretty close to where I live, and grinned. She found some solace in the fact that he lived so close. She led him into her room, the only other room, and instructed him to wait there while she made tea. Naruto nodded as she went to the kitchen, and he found the room to be quite modest, with nothing ostentatious. She remarked, "All right, the tea should be ready soon," as she entered and settled into her bed. Naruto gave her a raised eyebrow, sensing that something was wrong. He hastily typed the question and presented it to her. "Oh, nothing's wrong, it's just that." She trailed off as she got up, went to the nightstand, opened the top drawer, and picked up a toy gun with trembling hands. Naruto realized why she had called for him and got up quickly, holding her hands in his. She looked at him, nearly in a panic, before he smiled at her, as if she understood what he was saying. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and opened them to gaze at the pistol with resolve in her eyes. "It's going to be okay," she thought as she turned back to it. "I am not afraid," she said as she repeated it, while Naruto released her hands and observed her. She was no longer shaking and was composed. She returned slowly to the drawer and placed the gun inside, sighing when finished, but grinning at her progress. Previously, she would have been screaming, hyperventilating, and seeing that man's bloody face, as soon as she picked it up, but none of that occurred. She was startled out of her reverie when the kettle went off, and she hurried back to the kitchen, and swiftly poured the tea into cups, and served it to both her and Naruto. A pregnant silence descended upon them as they drank tea, but Naruto decided to break it, if he could. "Are you interested in learning JSL?" Asada read his query and blinked. "Is it challenging?" As Naruto shook his head and hastily jotted down a response, she asked. "You get used to it the more you practice," she said. "How precisely will that assist?" Though as Naruto rolled his eyes playfully, she asked. She read, blushing in shame, "Because dummy, I wouldn't have to write out everything to you, I will just sign and you will understand." "Alright, teach me," they said, staying up all night while Naruto taught her JSL. They were unaware that they were asleep on her bed during this time. The following day. As the pair lay in bed, the sun shone through the blinds and into the room. Asada was cuddling up to Naruto at the moment, but Naruto was the first to awaken as the light hit his eyes. He moaned as she began to wake up, thinking, "One day son, one day," but his gaze was drawn to the girl lying on top of him. He remembered last night, and he smiled as he remembered that she was a quick learner. He moved the hair in front of her face and back to her ears, and he kissed her forehead. When she opened her eyes, she was terrified that someone was in her room, no, in her bed. But then she calmed down as she looked up and saw that it was Naruto. She smiled and said, "Good morning," to which Naruto returned the smile and signed. "Good morning," he signed. Although JSL is mostly used by deaf people, he preferred using it over writing, because it was exhausting to have to write to everyone. Amada grinned and stepped forward to give him a peck on the lips. The two got up as they started to straighten their clothes, and Amada offered to make them a light breakfast, but Naruto waved her away, saying that he would make it for them. It was a pleasant surprise that he knew how to cook, but she assumed living alone would lead to that trait. "You look handsome today," she signed to him, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. She was a fast learner, though he could see a few minor flaws, nothing too big, but he would correct her. "Wow, this tastes so nice," Naruto flushed as she praised. "It's not that great," he said slowly in order to avoid confusing her by signing too quickly. "Not that good. This is unbelievable. You may become a top-notch cook instead of a sniper." As he shrugged, she proposed. "Want to get together one more today?" "We don't have school today," he wrote as she nodded. They went shopping, ate at a restaurant, watched a movie, and even visited the cafe where Naruto worked. It turned out that his coffee was just as good as his food, and he was well liked by the women there, which made Asada glare at them. She was envious because Naruto was her man, and the mere thought made her blush. Overall, it was a fun day, and they could both honestly say that the past 24 hours were the best they had ever had. They didn't even notice the sun was setting because they were the only things that mattered to them. "I guess I'll see you tonight in GGO," she smiled as he nodded. He signed, "Call me if you need anything," and they had already swapped phone numbers. "I'll be careful, okay," she muttered, and Naruto grinned at her worry while kissing her nose and silently laughing at her pout and blush. He signed, "I'll be fine, see you tonight," and she sighed in delight. She was thrilled to have met Naruto and felt that their meeting was fated. The mere thought made her stomach turn. She laughed as she entered and hurried to GGO, looking around because it would take a few minutes for Naruto to arrive. But, she ran into Kirito on the way. Kirito, when she asked, he turned to face her and appeared to have seen a ghost, yet his eyes were calculating, as though he was trying to figure her out. "How much do you know about Death Gun?" And she arched an eyebrow in response to his question. "What? For example, the man who killed someone in the game," she said. "That was a strange question." He gave her a nod. As Seinen gave him a weird look, he trailed off, "Back when you said you would kill everyone. Hey, did you truly believe that I would actually kill some people?" He only nodded when she asked. He said icily, "I did some background checks on you, and it seemed like you killed someone in your youth," which made Seinen shudder. No matter where she went, they would all criticize her. She heard Naruto say, "What's going on over here?" She turned to face him as his eyes widened and she started crying. He embraced her and gave Kirito a scowl. "How did you respond to her?" he asked in a venomous tone, and Kirito only gave him a blank stare in return. At the moment, he was only interested in finding the member of the laughing coffin. Kurito remarked, "You Naruto, I did some background checks on you as well. You have firearms training from a local gun range." Well, Naruto squinted. "What is it?" when Naruto asked him. Naruto growled at Kurito as he said, "Either one of you or the two of you are death gun," his eyes full of condemnation. "Watch your mouth, say what you want about B, but don't you dare judge Seinen," Naruto growled while consoling his lover. How could he make her cry? "It doesn't matter, you two are the only ones who can pull it off. One of you plays death gun, and the other kills the person in real life. In addition, you're a couple." Kurito didn't get to finish because he was thrown flying back by a punch to the face, politely given by Naruto. "What leads you to believe that this death gun is one of us, if you have seen him?" "I am not death gun, and neither is Seinen," Naruto said as Kurito got to his feet. "We were with you the entire time, and you saw our matches." He turned around and remarked, "It doesn't matter, I'll find out in the finals." Kurito turned to face Naruto, who remarked, "You lost to me, remember, you're not in the finals." Kurito replied, "One of the finalists dropped out, so they gave the spot to the person who had the next highest score, and since I had the highest score with me only using my sword," and turned to face Seinen. She was still upset about what Kurito had accused her of, so he gave her a gentle hug. When he whispered to her, "It's okay, Asada, don't listen to that ass, he doesn't know a thing about you," she sniffed and cuddled up to him. Naruto gazed down at her as she began, "Naruto." "What is it?" he asked. Naruto glanced at her before grinning and nodding. Promise me that you will never leave me," she added as she gave him a hug. I promise that I'll never leave you, and that's a promise of a lifetime," Naruto said with a small smile. As she brushed away the last of her tears, she laughed at his remark, "Now come on, we got ourselves a match and an asshole to hunt down," which he made in an attempt to lift her spirits. Let's go," she remarked as the two of them made their way to the location from which they would be sent out to compete in the finals, which would decide the winner. Everyone stared at Naruto and was in awe of him as they entered. "Look. The headhunter is here, headhunter. I suppose it worked for him because he always aimed for the head," someone said as Naruto arched an eyebrow. "Take a look. He has a unique avatar. I've heard that such avatars have insane skill states right out of the gate, and it's only available to people that transfer from front lines, and additional participants shared their thoughts. When someone commented, "It's a strength, agility, endurance, and a stealthy type," and says type, "Man, that avatar is op." Seinen turned to him and raised his eyebrows in disapproval. "How strong is your avatar really?" she asked, while Naruto wiped his head sheepishly. "Well, playing frontlines requires more skills. It doesn't hold your hand. Maybe I should get you a copy of that game, turn you into a real sniper," he responded with a soft nod. She remarked, "Sounds hard," while Naruto shook his head. She nodded in agreement as he comforted her. "No, all you have to do is learn military terms, NATO symbols, soldier roles, and so on and so forth. It's not hard once you get to know the inside and out." "Alright, the final is coming up. You know how it will go, don't you?" As he nodded, she inquired. He smirked and continued, "Yeah, I got the email with the rules. Games are going to be easy because the radar won't be able to pick me up, even after 15 minutes have passed," to which Seinen snorted. As Naruto jabbed her in the skull, she remarked, "That's an op ability and it ought to be banned." He cheekily remarked, "Perks of being an expert marksman," and she snorted and turned away, but Naruto laughed before he stopped. "What is the plan?" Then she turned to face him as he questioned. The two stood up as the match was about to begin, and they went to their room to wait for it to begin. "Well, I was hoping we could team up. 2 snipers are better than 1. We can pick off everyone else, and once we are done we can have a duel to decide the winner," she said, and Naruto nodded, accepting the plan. Naruto declared, "Here it goes," as all of the constants vanished. The finished map. Players were running around firing their guns as the game was in full swing. Some sought cover in bushes or behind rocks, while another dude with a fucking MG camped out on top of some rocks. "Do you see anyone with his weapon ready and Seinen prostrate on the ground?" Naruto asked him as he peered through his scope. Naruto whistled as he stared down his iron sights and fired off his rifle, putting a bullet through one of the players. He rose up and looked about. She said, pulling the trigger and firing her sniper, which blew up the grenades on one of the players' sides. After she nodded, he continued, "Come on, let's switch places. They know that there are snipers here," and the two fled, quickly locating a favorable spot with a view of the river and a bridge. Naruto tapped her shoulder and remarked, "Looks like one of your former teammates is waiting for someone," as the man pointed an assault rifle at him. "I am going to switch my position to that rock formation to your right. I'll flash my scope to communicate with you. If I flash it once, then 1 fire, flash it twice, hold fire, and if I flash it 3 times then we abort and regroup at this location," Naruto said as he opened the map and showed her where she was. She said, "Wow, I'm surprised you though so far ahead," as he got to his feet. As he hurried to his position, he added, "You have to think ahead if you want to win." She nodded to herself and turned back to her target while holding her fire. Then she sensed someone walking behind her and brought out her sidearm, but Kurito stopped her. She gave him a dagger-like gaze. He put his pointer finger to his lips and muttered, "You," with hatred. He said, keep it quiet. Look, I'm sorry, but Death Gun is someone I don't want to take chances with, and I know he is in this match. I just need to know who it is. As he looked down the bridge, a man wearing white armor and a suit approached from the other side before he began to charge. She looked to her right and saw two flashes, so she let the trigger drop and watched as the white player charged through the rain of bullets, swiftly eliminating her party mate. As Kirito simply stared at the white player, who was now paralyzed on the ground, she remarked, "Dame, if only he had the chance to reload, he would have survived. How in heck did you manage to avoid the satellite, by the way? I believe that ability to be exclusive to Naruto," she asked. When he spotted him, Death Gun, he froze. "I was chasing after that pale rider guy, but I jumped in the river to avoid his line of sight. I guess the river prevents it," he replied. She remarked, "That's one baddest sniper," as she peered at the rear rifle. She saw the masked player approach the rider, who was still on the ground, draw his handgun, and prepare to shoot. Seinen, stop him from firing that weapon no matter what you do. Seinen looked to her right, saw a single flash, nodded to herself, aimed down sight, and fired. The masked man avoided it, but he had to move quickly because Naruto fired a second bullet, which struck the man on the side of his arm. Then Naruto fired another shot, this time at the rider guy, which went through the player's head, ending the game and saving both of them. Seinen looked to her right, saw three flashes, got to her feet, and began to run. Wait. What are you doing?" she scowled as she went, and Kirito asked as he followed. She sprinted faster, saying, "Just leave me alone, you ass," but Kirito was able to keep up. Seinen soon arrived at the regrouping spot. "What are you doing here?" Wait, Kirito asked, but halted when he sensed a rifle barrel behind his head. "Alright, why are you pursuing her when I told you to avoid her? I should blow your minds away after what you said to her. Give me a valid reason why I shouldn't kill you right now." Kirito gulped, and didn't even notice the man approaching from behind him as Naruto asked. He sighed as he holstered his weapon and said, "Look, you saw that masked guy. He is Death Gun, and he's killed people in reality by killing them in her, so please, let me go. This guy is very dangerous," as Naruto narrowed his eyes. This guy had just accused him and Seinen of being Death Gun, and now he claims to have found him. If this guy was a killer, it was best to stop him. Naruto gulped and nodded as he approached Seinen, warning him, "Fine, but if you make her cry, I will end you." "Alright, here's the plan. I am sure that this Death Gun used the river to escape. It's one way to avoid detection. Not sure why people don't know that, but anyhow he is going to resurface. He's most likely is going to be in the ruins," he said with everyone nodding. Kirito remarked, "Then we will head to the city and rush him," as they made their way there. "How are we going to identify Death Gun?" They still didn't know his name, Seinen asked, and Naruto laughed. Kirito glanced at him and he replied, "Oh, I know it. If this guy is as literal as he is, then it's Sturban." "What's the reason behind that?" he asked. As they arrived in the city, Naruto responded, "Well, in German to die translates to Zu Sturban. There's a player named Sturban in here, so if you see him, put a bullet in his head." Kirito remarked, "Don't see him on the map," as Naruto hummed. "Seinen, you take up position in that building, which overlooks the avenue below and the stadium's entrance. I'll take my position in the building down street, which overlooks the stadium and other routes to it. Kirito, take up position on the stadium. There are two players there, and Sturban might go after them." Got it. Everyone nodded as Naruto presented the idea, and then they all hurried to their designated spots. With Seinen asked, "I don't know why we have to help him," as she ran to the building where she was supposed to take up position. She stopped to look at the stadium and saw the killer there. She gripped her rifle tighter as she felt a determined look on her face. She was about to move, but she retreated when she was hit by something, and when she opened her eyes, she was paralyzed and out of game. Death Gun. She looked up in horror as the man pulled out a pistol, the very pistol she had used to kill that man, but even with all the progress, it was still too much, and she began to panic. The masked player loaded his weapon and pointed it at her, and she could see the man's face in the barrel. As she closed her eyes, waiting for the end, she thought, "Naruto, I'm sorry, I wasn't strong enough." She heard a bullet go off, but it wasn't aimed at her. When she opened them, she saw a red spot on the masked player's shoulder. Another shot went off, but the masked player avoided it. Next came a smoke grenade, and she was picked up by someone. When she opened her eyes, she saw Naruto. He responded, "Don't worry, I got you," and began to sprint with her in tow. As Naruto gave her that dame smile, she responded, "Leave me, Naruto. I'll just slow you down. Remember how I said I would never abandon you?" As he carried her, he reminded her, but he stopped abruptly when he saw a bike. He put Seinen on it, paid for it, and then hurried away. Naruto remarked, "Seinen, I need you to destroy that depot. We can't let him follow us," and with a nod, Seinen attempted to squeeze the trigger, but was unable to do so. As Naruto glanced back, she murmured, I can't move my fingers," and he could see the predicament she was in. He shook her head and said, "Asada, listen to me, we have to pull the trigger. I know you can do it, while operating the bike." "I can't, I'm too weak," she said, and Naruto looked at her before passing his firearm to her. "Then use my Masen, trust your instincts. You don't need a scope, you are more skilled than you think," he said as she reached for his Masen, which was lighter than her rifle. She aimed down sight, but it was shaking too much, but she didn't say anything because she knew that Naruto was giving it his all, and that she had to do her share. She took a deep breath as she did so, and the world slowed down, bringing her target into view, but without aim assistance. Was this how Naruto fought? No bullet lines. It was harder than it looked. I miss, she muttered, and Naruto shook his head in response. He responded, no, you got him all right, as the masked player was enveloped in an explosion. She then realized that she had struck an automobile's gasoline tank. She said, I got him, while Naruto laughed. You're a natural. Have you ever considered becoming a professional sniper? After she remained silent, he asked, and Naruto scowled as he continued to drive out of the city and into the desert. He located a place for them to hide quickly, but since Seinen was with him, they would have to relocate within the next 15 minutes. He grumbled as he sat down in the little cave, with Seinen beside him. As she kept her eyes fixed on the ground, Seinen mumbled, I thought I was going to die. And Naruto groaned while ruffling her hair. Alright, you didn't. As she gazed at him, he reassured her. Naruto, how do you do it? How are you able to maintain your composure and resolve? She asked, wondering if his response would be of any use to her. Naruto looked up and hummed. Well, I've discovered that sobbing won't help. You have to stand up and keep going despite everything. As for remaining composed. She sighed and rested her head on his shoulder. I didn't know I was calm, he replied as she started to perspire. People have called me hot-headed, but never calm. Knowing that he would undoubtedly make fun of her, she murmured, you must think I'm weak and pathetic. I froze up when I saw that gun, and I was too scared. I feared that I would die, as she was weak, cowardly, and had to be babied by others. Asada, he corrected her as he took hold of her hand. No, you're not. Never let anyone tell you that you are weak or pathetic. Asada, you are strong, stronger than them and me. Even after everything you have been through, you have found the will, the strength to live. Greater men have killed themselves, because the burden of their actions was too much, but not you. You struggled and lived through it all. Everyone is afraid of death, even a battle-hardened warrior. After all, it's the fact that we won't be able to see our loved ones, not death itself. She sighed as she smiled at him. Has someone ever told you that you have too much optimism? She asked, and Naruto smiled. Only you, he replied as she kissed him and giggled. This cave won't keep them safe forever, Naruto stated, looking at her gravely. Well, I would love to make out right now. We have a physiopath hunting you, he warned. She asked, what's the plan? And said she would let him decide how to proceed. He hummed as he displayed the map. Well, I was thinking of luring him out using myself as bait. Well, you take up a sniping position and finish him off, he added with a nod. He hummed before changing into a normal German Africa corpse with the desert camouflage. But he will know where I am the minute the satellite scans the map, she said frowningly. He then gave her the clothes he had been wearing. Put those on. That uniform is the one that keeps me from being detected by the satellite scan. It's a pretty rare thing to come across by, he added with a nod. How about the one you're wearing right now? She asked. He said, says that it decreases the enemy's accuracy due to it being a desert uniform and all. It's also pretty light, to which she nodded and hastily changed her attire. With that resolved, where in the world is Kirito? Surely he would have been informed of the firefight, Naruto asked. He turned to face the entryway and saw Kirito standing there, puffing. I'm right here, speak of the devil and he shall appear. How did you fare? Naruto asked. Death Gun happened. I heard a battle going on, but by the time I reached the location of an explosion I found Death Gun. He was pissed and was after my head, so I had to run like hell, he said. Well, you're just in time. Me and Seinen came up with a plan of action, Naruto stated, explaining the plan to Kirito. Kirito nodded, acknowledging that it was a solid strategy. He also decided to act as bait because it appeared like Death Gun was pursuing him. They waited for the next 10 minutes before Naruto got up. All of them nodded and started to go, but Seinen stopped when she approached him, stood on her toes, and kissed him quickly. All right, let's move out. Seinen, you move to your location. Me and Kirito will be waiting, Naruto said. She whispered, be careful, as she hurried away, her cheeks flushed. Kirito turned to face him and arched an eyebrow. Are you two in a relationship? He asked, and as Naruto nodded, Kirito realized that he had made a mistake by accusing Seinen in front of her boyfriend, no less. Before Kirito could say anything, Naruto responded, save it, you'll get you beat down soon enough. He gulped a crap, and the two went out to wait for Death Gun. In the meantime, Seinen had eliminated one of the last players besides herself, Naruto, Kirito, and Death Gun. Naruto looked at the desert before pausing to consider a single spot, a scope glare. Come on down. As a bullet passed over them, he grabbed Kirito. Kirito pulled out his lightsaber. You can't deny it's a lightsaber ripoff, no matter what, and assaulted the adversary while dodging the gunfire. Naruto was immediately behind Kirito, sprinting forward. What kind of game did this guy play? Naruto said, this reminds me of when those Russian players charged the German lines. Boy did they get cut down fast, as Kirito's perspiration began to run down. He heard the echo of Seinen's rifle, but it missed the target. Death Gun aimed his rifle at her and fired, with Seinen firing as well. He destroyed the scope of her rifle, while his own gun was destroyed by the larger caliber bullet that was fired at him. Nice one, Naruto said as he leaped over Kirito and fired his sidearm. Death Gun was able to quickly avoid the bullet, but Kirito thrust his sword forward. Death Gun then dodged again and drew a small sword of his own. Kirito shot forward, trying to put an end to this as soon as possible, but Death Gun blocked it again. Naruto fired, but Death Gun used Kirito as a shield. Be mindful of your fire, Kirito shouted as Naruto swore. Death Gun said, look how pathetic you are. If the old Kirito saw you now he would be shaking his head, which infuriated Kirito. He began to attack widely, but his attacks were sloppy, so Death Gun took full advantage of the situation and stabbed Kirito with his sword. Naruto cursed once more, and if he fired, Death Gun would use Kirito as a shield again. Kirito was allowing his rage to get the better of him, so he decided to watch the two swordsmen duel. So someone is planning to murder Asada in her apartment. Not on my watch, he thought as he overheard Kirito and Death Gun talking. Seeing that Kirito was losing, he chose to save him rather than risk Kirito dying in real life, so he put a bullet in his head. As Death Gun turned to face Kirito, he saw his body split into pixels. He added, so, you're the player that everyone has been whispering about, as Naruto shrugged and came charging forward with his side army. Death Gun ducked but raised his sword to stop the knife that was aimed at his neck. Sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about, Naruto said, firing his weapon and striking Death Gun in the shoulder. He separated him. Naruto grinned and remarked, you know, you are in the sights of a sniper right now, while Death Gun laughed. Death Gun laughed as Naruto laughed. I destroyed her scope. No matter how good of a sniper you are in this game, you can't hit anything without a scope, he said. Death Gun's eyes whitened as a bullet struck his knee, causing him to stumble before Naruto kicked him in the face, causing him to fall on his face. You assume she only has one rifle, Naruto remarked as he approached and leveled his sidearm at him. Go in peace, in my opinion, but for a guy like you. Burn in hell, Naruto growled, firing his sidearm to finish off the Death Gun. He grinned as Seinen approached him and scowled as he gave her a brief explanation of the situation. She was starting to have a panic attack, which is a normal response to such news. He embraced her and reassured her, Seinen, relax. After this is over, I'll head over to your apartment as soon as I can. She relaxed. Now what, she asked as Naruto hummed and grabbed for his sidearm, only to be stopped by Seinen's charming smile. As Naruto swallowed, she sung, not this time. Naruto looked everywhere but at Seinen, who gave him a charming smile. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. How about a tie? With a bang, she remarked, smiling, and Naruto pondered her meaning before she produced a grenade without a pin. Before the grenade detonated, killing both of them and resulting in a tie and both of them being declared the finals victors, Naruto stated blankly, this is going to hurt. With Naruto opened his eyes, threw off the visors, and ran out of his room and apartment straight for Asada's. He prayed to whatever higher power was out there that she was safe. It took him less than an hour to get to her apartment, and as he heard struggling, his blood boiled over. He reared his leg back, nearly knocking the door off its hinges and hitting someone. He charged in and saw Asada sobbing on the floor, and when he looked up, he saw that man, Kyoji, charging at Naruto with a crazy expression on his face. However, Naruto swiftly moved and struck Kyoji, taking all of his breath away before he was rendered unconscious by a fist. Naruto then turned to face Asada, running up to her and picking her up as she sobbed on his shoulder. He allowed her to sob as she ran his hand up and down her back, cursing his incapacity to speak at the moment. She calmed down after a few minutes, but she continued to hug him. She said, thank you. As Naruto glanced down, he turned to the unconscious man and snarled, that bastard was going to pay. Is it possible to call the police? As she nodded, he signed to her. He then detained the man while she phoned the police, who soon showed up and took him away, while she gave an account of what had transpired. Are you okay? Even though he was unable to talk, his concern was heartwarming as he asked her, and she smiled slightly. I'll be fine. She replied as Naruto gave her a quick glance and then nodded slowly. It was obvious that she was afraid, and he sat beside her. Want me to spend the night with you? She nodded when he asked, and he smiled before guiding her to her bed. She closed her eyes and cuddled up to him, allowing his comforting warmth to soothe her. It was such a serene and protective moment. She said, thank you for staying by my side, Naruto-kun, as he gave her a gentle grin and a forehead kiss. The two fell asleep shortly after. After 3 months. The two have been dating for 3 months, and just a month ago, they celebrated her birthday, making her 17 years old. They also celebrated Naruto's birthday a few days ago, making him 18 and ready to graduate from high school. 3 months have passed since Kyoji attempted to rape Asada, and boy was Naruto furious. He wished he had killed that bastard for what he had tried. Are you certain that you want to do this? As Naruto nodded, Asada asked. He signed, I want to try. I don't care if I can't talk, I can still take orders, as she nodded and groaned. She would stand by him. I'm done talking about myself. How about you? He inquired while she hummed. What do you think about me joining the JSTF? Before he began signing, she asked him the question while he considered it. What do you want to be? I'll help you if that's what you desire. She grinned slightly when he asked her what position she wanted to play in the JSTF. He laughed silently and she replied, should be obvious, a markswoman, he should have figured it out. What will it be? A family company. She chuckled at it, and then let out a sorrowful sigh when he sang to her. She remarked, I wish you didn't have to go that far, the French Foreign Legion. He was planning to travel to France and attempt to join the Legion. You know they're my only shot, the JSDF would never accept me, even if they say my skills, if I don't make it as a legionnaire, then I'll come straight back home to you and into college, he said as she sighed. As Vito moaned, she said, but if you do make it, I won't be able to see you for 5 years. He pulled out a little box, and she arched an eyebrow before her eyes whitened. He opened the box to reveal a ring, and as she put her hands in front of her mouth, her eyes began to well up with tears. I know, but know this, that I will always love you, he signed. Will you wed me? She nodded, and he signed. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He slid the ring into her finger. He never imagined that he would be asking someone to marry him at such a young age, but he knew that it was the right thing to do. After all, he wouldn't be able to see her for 5 years. This was the happiest moment in my life, and all that mattered to me was him. I only cared what he thought. She replied as she brought him into a deep kiss. After 10 years. Eddie, a young blonde girl, yelled as she gave her father a hug and laughed when he raised her up. Harry-chan. Don't rush around the house, her father tickled her while she grinned while her mother shouted from the kitchen. However, Daddy is at home. As her mother left, the young girl yelled, grinned, and turned to face her husband and daughter. She then approached him and planted a kiss on him. The words, welcome home, dear. He signed, good to be back, while ruffling his daughter's hair. She smacked it away with a frown. Daddy? I've grown up. Even though he couldn't speak, he was the best aimed sharpshooter to have ever volunteered to join the Legion. Nevertheless, because he couldn't speak, he was limited to the rank of a single sniper who could only take orders. In addition, he was just another foreigner willing to die for France, the more the better. It's been 10 years and it was the best 10 years of his life, she said childishly, but Naruto simply laughed as he ruffled her hair once more. The past 10 years were also some of Asada's best. She joined the JSDF and excelled as a sniper. Both were highly regarded and well known throughout the world for their abilities. Naruto was well known for having killed 714 enemy combatants in the Middle East, in less than 100 days, all of whom were killed without the use of a scoped rifle and surpassing the White Death himself. Asada was well known for taking part in numerous competitions held by militaries around the world, and she was one of the best snipers, having almost won them all. 5 years ago, Naruto returned from his 5-year contract, at which point they welcomed Harem, their first child. When Asada informed her daughter, who merely pouted, now dear, let daddy wash up a bit, then you can play. Naruto sighed as she moaned, now dear, I have time to play with her. She responded, honestly, you are too soft on her, as Naruto planted a kiss on her. He signed, love you too, before continuing to play with his kid. Asada grinned at the scene. She mumbled, thank you for always being there for me, Naruto-kun, as she trailed the two. Her life had definitely improved.